life's abyss, and then you dive. That's why we get hive minds and Hollywood mob rule. Yo, what? It's the mind virus. No. As perhaps a dated reference, but as what they said on the set of The Abyss. Before we get to that, I just want to say welcome to your companion program E with an old-timey English spelling for Thursday, July 13th. Welcome to Friendship Emulator. We're going to talk about some more classic films in our continuing series. We're recording this one late at night. I might sound a little hushed as a result of that, but a little bit of, I guess the housekeeping up front would be, I listened to some of the previous episode after I recorded it, and I have to say, I don't know if it was before or after I took some kind of a prescription-based sleeping medication. It's a little substance called hydrox. Something about me was very slow-moving and drowsy, and I don't know. I think we're going to try and amend that in the future. We have a lot to talk about. I'm going to tell you all of my opinions about the new Bionicle movie, Mantanui, his new form in metal and aqua, just fantabulous. I have to say, it's an uncrustable. But yeah, we're currently broadcasting. Actually, I was gonna see if I had my underwater mic, but we're just outside of the raspberry lemonade dunk tank thing that they've provided for everyone on site here at the studio. Of course, if you're not a lemonade fan, perhaps if you have some kind of acid reflux issue, for example, you can go with a fruit punch or something, and they won't splurge for alcoholic drinks, unfortunately. But that is what's going on, and we've just emerged. I have to say, it's a little abrasive on the skin, but there's these cool little things. They're not quite like Easter eggs, but they're more shaped like discs, but like kind of thick, like almost like the size and shape of like a hockey puck. You open them up and they have like little trivia facts about classic films like The Abyss and The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, Calligraphy. And a little bit of stuff about the history of vaporwave too. So we're going to be bringing that straight to you. I just want to say thanks to anyone who's listening. I did set up a Patreon. The bonus material for the Patreon is a series of comics, like web comics, just called Ruminoid. It's the Ruminoid web comics. And once every week or two, this is going up. And so, yeah, if you have a few bucks to spare, we're kind of in this soft launch mode, but I'm kind of happy about the brand and where it's going, at least in my mind. You know, it's like when a creative project is like your quote unquote baby or whatever. It's like it's been very fun to think about and let these episodes sort of unfold. A lot of stuff coming up in the future, but just to talk about my new obsession. And the last thing I didn't really talk about. Let's just say that I was really, really, really obsessed with the Russian. I don't even know if it's like alternative or underground or something like that. The Russian reality television show from the internet. I it might have been on a cable. House 2 or Home 2. I'm being completely allegorical, almost like one of the movies we're going to talk about. Damn, it's like over 100 years old now. It's actually kind of crazy. I watched a 100-year-old movie. But yeah, I'm speaking allegorically, of course. I had a little hyperfixation with this thing, and it was a shit show. You know what I mean? But I feel like I can talk about it now a little bit. And one reason is because one of my like idols in at least in music, who is easily one of my favorite, top 3 rappers. It's hard to hold a flame to Smoke Team 6. No, I'm kidding. Roy Allen Phillips, though. Danny Brown, turns out, was a big fan of the that internet show, Fishbowl or whatever, Fish Center Live. I think it's an Adult Swim thing. I'm just kidding. It's called Fish Tank. And Danny Brown is like, he seems like he's always been like kind of super online. Lil B is like getting super online now too. His latest music video features like his gaming rig, like his Twitch rig, and he gets like hundreds of views. It's pretty good for him, I guess. But he's got like decked out like 3 or 4 or 5 screens or something, and all the RGB stuff, and it's really interesting. It's kind of like he's taking like RGB gaming aesthetics into, I don't know, rap, like Lil Uzi Vert did with like anime or something like that. But yeah, what I wanted to talk about is actually not that, but my new thing is like not just vaporwave, because I've been pretty into One of Tricks Point Never. We'll talk about a little bit, and Vectroid, who are two pretty pivotal artists. For a year, I just discovered Vectroid pretty recently, but Daniel Lopton, One of Tricks Point Never, a long ass time. But my new thing, it's called signalwave. It's kind of weird because I got in touch with this one artist and like commented on their YouTube video and came up with a new way. I learned that there's like 2 totally different ways of downgrading the audio quality of like an MP3. And so I learned something more akin to like VHS or like what do you call it, like Winamp radio feeds from the late 90s, early 2000s. And that's a sample rate crush as opposed to a bit rate crush. Bit rate crush is like, NES music, 8-bit. It's like had this like FM synthesis thing going. I don't know if it's FM synthesis per se, but it's sounds that were designed to be listened to in 8 bits, and to listen to an 8-bit MP3 is kind of cool. It's cool sounding. It sounds almost more like a telephone or a walkie-talkie, whereas sample rate crushing, you kind of get a full gamut of like the frequency range. It sounds a little bit more muddy. It sounds very similar to VHS, which is confusing to me, because VHS is a analog technology. But I'm learning about these things, and I'm trying like new types of like reverb and stuff. Been making a lot of like loops, and just been talking to like a couple different musicians in this realm, and the wild thing that I discovered that's like gonna change the way that I look at music going forward, because it gets almost to the heart of like my philosophy about subversively illegal art and stuff like this obsession with like Vera Drew and like Brad Neely's Wizard People, Dear Reader. The fact that it flew in the face of these things that they don't fly in the face of copyright in the sense of downright theft, but it's like it almost doesn't, you know what I mean? There is that anarchist almost philosophy of property is theft or something like that. But yeah, John Oswald in 1985 coined the term plunderphonics, right? And for some reason I just never examined the word. I heard it like months or possibly years ago, maybe listening to Vectroid talk about something, but I'm not really sure. I thought that it was like it was almost like an onomatopoeia for some reason, but without thinking about the definition of the word plunder. So there is an essay or something that he wrote, and it's called something along the lines of music piracy as a compositional prerogative or something like that. And I listened to some of his music. He started, I think the first Plunderphonic, which was like actually the name of the project slash like not really band, but like it was like the name of like, yeah, the project that stuff was released under. And I think it was actually bankrolled by like Elektra Records, which at the time may or may not have been bought up by EMI, but I'm pretty sure Elektra Records is like Bjork's record label, and they've been a subsidiary of one of the major four for a long time. But point being, it was much like Muzak, which was an actual company that like licensed sound-alikes that were not for profit to like shopping centers. That's why you get the entire like subgenre and vaporwave of like mallsoft, and there's this really classic almost mallsoft, they call it utopian virtual style vaporwave record called Yes, We're Open, and it's got a lot of the KMP classics, I believe. Don't quote me on this, but and I can't remember the name of the artist because it's got, I believe, Japanese or Chinese characters. But yeah, the KMP classics are almost as essential to like the classic vaporwave stuff, in my opinion, as the like the Muzak sound-alikes catalog is. And you get into that stuff with like the like Kmart tapes made by various people. But I mean, what the signalwave gets a little bit more into is like transmissions and like the stuff of like the noise between radio stations and stuff like that. Anyway, John Oswald, Plunderphonics project, definitely check it out if you're like interested in anything from like Chopped and Screwed, DJ Screw, to like C-Punk, to Witch House, all that proto vaporwave type stuff. Because 1985, it seems to me, the way that he was not only like remixing and making mashups like way before that was a thing, he was doing it not for profit in this revolutionary way where it was like, okay, my music is kind of just going to be this this designer luxury art item or something. And if you're going to check out any of his music, I have this noted, Carly Simon and Faster Pussycat. It's like actually a mashup. And he has like weird titles for his songs that don't really go, they're not one to one, but this one is called Vain, and it's You're So Vain, but it goes between the Carly Simon like original version and Faster Pussycat, which is like a hair metal band. It sounds really cool, and it's not slowed like DJ Screw would slow it, but it seems to me that that was a missing link in all of this stuff for a long time. Now, fast forward from 1989, the first Plunderphonic tape, to 2009. That's what, 30 years later. And we get what some people consider the first vaporwave, like classic vaporwave album by Devin Hendricks, also known as JPEG Mafia. Also one of my favorite rappers. Although I will say, I love Danny Brown and JPEG Mafia's past work a lot. I don't hate it. The collaboration between them, the new one, but I would not put it in like my top albums of last year, or was it last year? Are we 6 months through this year? I would not put it at the top in general. But yeah, not bad though. Not bad. Yeah, that's an interesting 2 degrees of separation there. Stuff that I'm interested in. It's just vaguely surrounding the Scare in the Hose record. But yeah, so you got Devin Hendricks and then Chuck Person, which are the side projects for JPEG Mafia and 106 Point Never, respectively, predated those projects. I guess because they wanted to make more original music. And it's interesting because Macintosh Plus kind of came after, but also before Vectroid. And Vectroid is a little bit more of the like working with original compositions, I guess. I don't know. One of my favorite records probably from any of the Vectroid discography, any of the side projects, is the Sega, what is it called? The whatever, the Sega Virtual Disc or whatever it's called. It's really, really cool. Drowned out, like these very like late 90s or like late 80s, early 90s sounding reverbs that are just like over the top with all these Sega Dreamcast music. It's cool to have like a really specific source, which is what, you know, she does with like the Kmart tapes too. But if there was going to be a fourth in the round table, which I would say 4 different OGs in the classic vaporwave scene, James Ferraro. And I'm not quite as familiar. I mean, I've gotten really into 1 or 2 of his records, Farside Virtual and Skid Row, and I saw him live once. He seemed pretty disaffected, which is cool. It was a good performance. But yeah, that's the 2010-ish era stuff from 2009 to 2011. But I will say, back in the day, yeah, I would say maybe 2011, 2012. I'm trying to think of like where I was living at the time and who I was hanging out with. But there was St. Pepsi and Lynshaven Virtual Plaza blowing up on YouTube and stuff. And that's like almost proto signalwave, I want to say. I don't know. Lindshaven Virtual Plaza, certainly with like the NTSC stuff, just straight up like TV feed, kind of like up for the record cover. I've been revisiting that a lot too, because I feel like that's a very important record for the kind of remix music that I'm trying to make now. And maybe we'll never know how some of that stuff was made. Rest in peace. But yeah, the other thing about Chuck Person I realized is some say it's the prototypical vaporwave album, if not Dreamcast Summer Songs by Devin Hendricks, but Echo Jams Volume 1. Curious that since 2009 or 10 or whatever, there hasn't been a Volume 2. But it turns out that in 2012, for Record Store Day, there were 4 vinyls produced of, I think, the same loops from Echo Jams Volume 1. And there's about 30 of each on each record, and there's 4 records, and each record is an edition of 120. So it's like something about the number 120 or something. But I don't know. Maybe it's related to Echo the Dolphin. Who knows? Conspiracy theory. Pepe Sylvia. I don't know. But anyway, I find that there's a lot of cool stuff coming out in the vein of people bridging that gap between Plunderphonics and Signalwave. And I'm trying to find more of the stuff that's like noisy field recording, almost like emo noise, if that makes sense. I'm very interested in music that is like not harsh noise, but also not angelic, pretty quote unquote ambient music, you know. Of course I love ambient music. I love Brian Eno. I love all that stuff. Even the Aphex Twin stuff. But oh god, I can actually really, I could talk about ambient music. I can talk about William Basinski. That's almost like 4chan moo core music though. Lucky Dragons has some very soft, ethereal ambient music. And like I said, I love that stuff. But what I want is like something that doesn't quite pierce your ears, but that has like a slow, almost droney sense of dread to it. And I found a couple things, but there's about a dozen or so albums on my list to check out. It's pretty amazing what has happened in 14 years since Devin Hendricks, Chuck Person, Floral Shop by Macintosh Plus, MacBook, Mac plus minus, Sharp, MacBook Sharp. I'm sorry. I'm very bad with names. And when you have 12 of them, no. That one probably is my favorite though. Floral Shop. It really changed the way that I think about music, almost in the way that like studying Indonesian traditional music did. The gamelan. I don't want to say Javanese. Whatever the one that's slower is. It would be great to actually dedicate almost an entire episode to that sort of stuff. Excuse me, my dang throat. But yeah, the last thing I'll say in terms of Signalwave, the new stuff, there's a lot of artists that I'll recommend maybe in the future. But if you're interested in seeing what I'm talking about, there's this really good record that I think encapsulates the feeling probably of French cable television. It's the vibe that I get from it anyway. A French vaporwave artist called Canal Plus, and few records, but Vendredi is the one that I really like. It has like a green sort of weather scanner thing going on about it. And that's the other thing I wanted to say. A lot of the oh God, is France the Commonwealth? No, it's not. All of the English speaking, I don't know. So Canada, right? In terms of vaporwave, Canada's the thing, because I've heard a few artists. I want to say like CT57 or someone. There's a lot of good stuff coming out of Canada. A lot of the stuff, I thought One Tricks Point Never was maybe from the UK, but it's just Warp Records is a UK label. There is some good stuff, I think, from Japan. Listening to some of it, there's like no way. But it's hard to learn about some of these individual micro, I wouldn't say cult. The word cult artist or cult following, even when used in that context, has heavy connotations, but very small, almost micro celebrities. I don't know a lot about. I only know those four in terms of, and it's because they're so popular. There have been like, magazine articles written about them and stuff like that. But John Oswald is, yeah. And then from John Oswald to freaking Canal Plus, because there's something so interesting to me about not just Canadian, but like maybe European vaporwave. A sort of step away from the Blade Runner, LA, New Tokyo vibe of it all. And I really don't mean to put shade on stuff like the ethereal, Telepath or something like that is a good artist. I kind of love, but heavy Blade Runner vibes in that music, and mostly just because of the art, I guess. New Tokyo, all that. It's interesting to take the dark sort of metropolis vibe out of it and put this like almost like French Riviera, like Italian countryside thing into it, which is like what Canal Plus sort of does. It's like there's something dreary to it, but it's like daytime rainy dreariness or something. It's just really cool stuff, and I don't know if anyone would ever have any recommendations for noisy, droney signalwave, or I guess what they would call, to me it feels like what you would call broken transmission, which is, people say, is a synonym. I tried to do some research on this. I wish I had like a mentor, but yeah, that's supposed to be a synonym for signal wave, which all of it is kind of just like weather scanner, weather channel, source material type stuff. If you know any noisy albums that are like kind of informed by vaporwave, let's say that, right? Let me know. And with that, I didn't really think that I was going to talk quite so much about vaporwave and signal wave, but this stuff is really cool, and I love the sleepiness of it, the hypnagogicness of it. I wonder if my next step is to actually just get into the classic witch house stuff, but I don't know. DJ Screw's where it's at. There's like 600 of those records. All right, Next up, movies. Well, if that was like a lot of information, and this feels like one of those, you have to kind of have your pen and notepad. That is, if you're interested in any of that stuff I was just talking about for like 20 minutes. The film portion of this is no exception. I was thinking I would kind of just go off the cuff with this one, but I do have quite a bit of notes. And I learned quite a bit. Like, for example, did you know that James Cameron is kind of an asshole? I had no idea. I thought he was like, I believed all the propaganda about him. You know what I mean? And all the propaganda he's been feeding us about destroying the white imperialism with the Fido Goes West. What's it called? The Pocahontas themes. Wow. We're recording late at night, and the trains are going wild. Excuse me. But yeah. So I watched The Abyss in the cabinet of Dr. Caligari. And really weird combination of films. But I think actually thinking about it now, there are some actual thematic similarities in the sense that it does kind of deal, both of them do deal in their own ways with making an allegory out of a global conflict, kind of. James Cameron is a little bit more hokey and literal with it, I guess. Watching The Abyss, being kind of moved by the music and finding it overall, like pacing wise, I don't know, it's pretty weird, I guess. One thought that I had is that it would be really cool if they kind of remastered it or like even remade it, because what he's done with Avatar 1 and 2 in terms of like visual effects, I'm sure honestly like 10 or 20 years from now, or wait, how long has it been since 89 when The Abyss was made? We'll look back maybe at Avatar 1 and 2 and be like, okay, it looks really cool, but does it look realistic? But, you know, like we couldn't possibly imagine, you know, I don't know. It's always history as a way of like smiling back at us. I don't know. What is the phrase about history rhyming or whatever? But the interesting about Caligari is how it has survived throughout history. And it's one of those, you know, over 100 years old, as I said. And we can sort of like still talk about it in these like new ways. And maybe that's just like good expressionism or whatever. But in terms of The Abyss, all right, so let's get into it. It opens, it's 1989, it's Cold War stuff. We've got like a deep water diving rig. There's a nuclear submarine that crashes, and all these people, including an estranged couple, have to go and like recover the freaking bombs that you know maybe have to be deactivated or whatever, or maybe they were like worth so much money. I'm not really sure. It gets pretty dramatic. I was wondering when like news of like world events would come in, and that's at about like 30-40 minutes. I was like, wait, when are we gonna like pull back on like what this is actually, what the like the stakes of all this are, and it's like, okay, no, it's like it's nuclear war. It's pretty wild. They don't even say like how deep they're going at first until it gets to like to the very end. Spoiler alerts for these extremely old movies. But yeah, there's a point halfway in where like the there's like a rig above water that's like a crane or whatever. It falls like into the ocean because they just happen to, you know, have to go and retrieve this nuclear material like 10 hours before they know a storm is going to hit, and then the storm inevitably hits. And there's a lot of willful suspension of disbelief in this, but when it wants to be emotionally striking, it kind of is. And yeah, behind the scenes, kind of a shit show, as is commonly reported on. I'll talk a little bit about that. But in terms of the story, I was emotionally gripped by the near death scene, or like kind of death scene. That's another really interesting parallel between these two films, is that there is an iconic pivotal scene involving a kind of dead person. With yeah, just really good really good imagery, like the best visual moments of the films almost. My favorite character has to be Hippie. James Cameron just went and decided that he was going to name one of his characters Hippie, probably so that what's her name? Mary Elizabeth Mastrantano. What's her name? I've got it right here, actually. Do I? Mastrantonio. But I think the R is silent, so it's Mastantonio. Yeah, she delivers the line when push comes to shove with the drill sergeant guy who's like experiencing a psychotic episode as a result of the deep sea ailment that he has that he's not telling anyone about. They're arguing, and this dude's, his name is literally Hippie, and she goes, "Yo, Hippie, do me a favor, stay off my side." And it's like, wow, this like reeks of ideology. That's pretty funny. It's like, that's probably the entire reason for his name. But Hippie's like a really funny character, even so. He's kind of got like a Discordian Church of the Subgenius, like conspiracy theorist thing going on. And yeah, you love to see it. There's, much like Alien, there's like this non-terrestrial rig where you're in like the the depths and the darkness, and these people are just straight up wearing casual clothes, fucking barefoot, eating, you know, grog and like sailors' tongues and all that stuff. It's very interesting. I would say like kind of, honestly, like space cowboy vibes. Alan Silvestri, I believe, another Italian name there. He did the music for this, and I think it's honestly my favorite part of the entire movie. Pretty good emotionally gripping plot, honestly. I may have just been in like quite a mood when I watched it, I'm not sure. But there's like this scene where they first encounter the alien entity, which is like the Deus Ex Machina. Like, you're waiting sort of like halfway through to like, okay, what's going on with the alien? Like, apparently there's a 3-hour version of this movie. But yeah, there's like a water tendril coming through because it can just like control water, apparently. it is a prototype for the same visual effects they used in Terminator 2 for the metal guy, whatever his name is, the liquid metal guy. Great movie. I think I saw that in the theater when I was a kid. Yeah. Anyway, Alan Silvestri, he did music for Back to the Future 1 through 3, Forrest Gump, Polar Express, all great soundtracks. That scene is just like, it almost reminded me of John Williams in the what they call the love suite in AI artificial intelligence, where there's these kind of like bells, but they're like almost like water. It might be the mixture of water bells with like, or I'm sorry, regular metal bells with like water. What do they call them? Not singing bowls, but the ones that like actually have water in them. It sounds really good. It reminds me a lot of the Japanese like sound environment stuff and like American New Age music from late 80s, early 90s. Another vaporwave fodder sort of situation with all that stuff. It just sounds good. Sounds pretty. But yeah, there are some, I wouldn't say plot holes, but like I said, willful suspension of disbelief moments where the kind of going psycho drill sergeant Sarge guy is like not being monitored for a good like 20 to 30 minute chunk of this movie, and it's like there's no way. Ed Harris is really cool in it. I think that if they ever make a movie of Final Fantasy VII, Ed Harris should play Sid in it. He's like born for that role. It would be awesome. Although, is he still alive even? How old is Ed Harris now? I'm gonna look it up real quick. He appears to be alive. He's quite old. When was his... Oh yeah, he was in like some prime time. Oh yeah, he was in Westworld. Oh yeah. He's 50, 73 now? He's getting up there. They're gonna have to make that movie soon. Yeah. Other sort of things in the plot. It's emotionally gripping, but looking back on it, I'm like, they duped me, because with the warhead stuff, that within a span of about 10 minutes, there's like the sergeant is like very slowly, rung by rung, with a chain, lowering it down into the water, and it's like maybe he doesn't know if it will activate upon touching water or something, but it just seems like he's like trying to be extra careful to make it not bump anything, because everything's just water. I don't know. I didn't think about whether a nuke would work in water at the time, or it would just like randomly explode in water. But within 10 minutes, I swear to God, they're shooting a like an Uzi machine gun or something at the ship where he's like underneath the moon pool. Anyway, the ending of it is really cool, and it's like Aqua battle bots. They're like going around and like ramming each other in these tiny little vessels, and then of course Ed Harris like does the inhales the liquid oxygen or whatever, which apparently was like an obsession of James Cameron's really early on. And obviously the deep sea and the ocean in general has been like an obsession of his. But as far as like the behind the scenes thing, Mastantonio, Mary Elizabeth Mastantonio, it's such a hard name to say. She was apparently silent about it for a long time, but she kind of got a little bit too battered up during the near death scene, where she technically like dies and they have to revive her. It was the only way for her to like get from point A to point B, because they had to like do so many takes apparently, and she blew up at James Cameron. And I don't want to go off into any conspiracy theories like a hippie, but she was in like a perfect storm after that. I just learned today that her breakout role was Scarface, which I still haven't seen. Godfather is coming up though. It's going to be crazy when I watch Godfather in like a day or two. It's going to be very fun. Look out for that on next week's episode. Hopefully next week. We're going to do it, folks. So not only was his treatment of some of the cast personally kind of an issue, but they were plagued by all of these sort of technological issues, and like I heard something about people getting like infections or something like that, but they were 5 weeks behind and $4 million over budget after principal photography, and there were like multiple incidents of people almost drowning and just screaming matches happening all the time, and it's kind of massive like what they did in terms of constructing this artificial set with like two differently sized but gigantic pools made out of like old abandoned nuclear generator facilities or something. Somehow they made it, I don't know, maybe that had something to do with the fact that people's skin got fucked up, but apparently there was like over chlorination at one point because of murkiness in the water. There was like executives coming, like them having to like stop, and fights in the editing bay, all this sort of stuff. What I learned basically is that James Cameron has always been a huge megalomaniac. I don't know what he does now with like NDAs or something, but hey, as long as the themes of his movies are good, right? I don't know. I wonder how much money I've spent on James Cameron in my life, including my parents taking me to see like, Terminator and Titanic and stuff. I saw Avatar 1 multiple times, and I think I paid for it myself each time. I don't even know. It's not something I really want to I really want to even think about. But one of the most interesting facts about this movie is that there's an alternate or like extended version with like a deleted ending. And the aliens, who were I guess meant to be benevolent and peacefaring and stuff, just decide to send a huge tidal wave everywhere and like kill everyone on Earth. Which is like, first of all, that wouldn't even really kill everyone. There'd still be pockets of civilization. But damn, I think there's a word for that. And James Cameron went on the record and said, I like the 2.5 hour version, but it's better at 3 hours, the long version. Eventually they did a restoration of the deleted ending, because one of the reasons it was deleted is because it didn't look good enough, but also it would have been way too long of a movie. Just destroy the human race at the end after having this like beautiful moment with like extraterrestrials in the deep ocean where they like communicate with you, and somehow magically prevent you from getting the bends. you don't have to depressurize for 6 to like 20 like maybe days on end. No, you can just shoot straight up from 120,000 feet or whatever. Your skull won't explode or anything. they had this insane technology and this extremely intuitive, imitation is the form of flattery style of communicating, where they just kind of mimic what it's there's not a lot of thought put into like what intelligence is or means. It's just like a lot of dramatic stuff happening, and emotionally jarring, emotionally pulling movie. But yeah, knowing now what I know about James Cameron, it's like I described it as like Stanley Kubrick vibes on set, South Park said James Cameron does what James Cameron does because James Cameron is James Cameron. And you hate to agree with South Park, but he's that kind of bungholio. Now there's a collaboration made in heaven. What is it? Matt Judge, Matt Judge, the bizarro Mike Judge and James Cameron should make a movie together. That would be so funny. It'd be so good. All right. After the break, we're going to get into an older and maybe something I can talk a little bit more academically about film, Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. Only the second silent film I've ever watched. And no, the second one is not Metropolis, but I do want to see that. We're going to talk about it in just a moment. Thank you. All right. Now, the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari is kind of a markedly different film. Not only because it's like 70 years older, but it's more like art house, and less like blockbuster. In fact, the three set designers who worked together were, I believe, painters. Don't quote me on that. I believe they were like expressionist artists of some sort from Germany. Starring Cesare, who I thought it was Cesar, played by Conrad Voigt, in what I think is like an amazing what's the word that I'm looking for? Like prediction, forecasting of like new romantic goth aesthetics, because he straight up looks like not so much like Kiss, but like The Cure. Like there's some other bands that did like the new romantic, like black and white, like black around the eyes makeup. It's like a spitting image of that. Not to mention it's like an astounding performance from the actor. Werner Krauss plays Dr. Caligari, also does a really good job. And the guy who plays Francis, who's like kind of the actual main character, at least the protagonist, really good performances. But yeah, the main thing about it is like there's these sets that are like made out of cardboard or whatever, and there's speculation that certain parts of it were budget constraint oriented or whatever. And here's the other thing. I stopped watching and listening to one version of this movie because I realized that I thought it was just extremely experimentally ahead of its time, and I'm learning to understand the way that silent films work with their soundtracks. But I even went and found on YouTube that there's something called the electronic Dr. Caligari, where some guy made like a techno soundtrack to go along with it. But there are various different soundtracks, and I went back after listening to one that was produced in the 80s, because it had like saxophones and electric guitars in it, and it felt wrong, kind of. I mean, it's pretty good music and stuff. Kind of had like a a fun, like, almost in the spirit of expressionist art, like abstract, angular, disjointed, almost was like no wave sound to it, mixed with like bebop almost. But yeah, it did not really fit with the time placement in my mind of the visuals of the movie. So this other soundtrack that I heard was like really good, and I even made like a remix of one of the tracks when they're like, "Oh, let's go to the fair." It's like another one of those very ginger sort of great movement music that you would only find in a film almost. Alan and Francis are these two friends that want to go to the fair to just because it's like a thing. And when they get there, they find Dr. Caligari, and historic scene in all of film, where they go inside of the tent, and this somnambulist, aka a sleepwalker, is awoken, and Dr. Caligari is just kind of hanging out in his traveling cart. He came to town, and I learned a little bit more about what the film is actually about. Some say, with evidence from one of the screenwriters, that it's like an allegory for World War One. Cesare, the somnambulist, being this zombie figure, a personification of death, and that it's really a story about what is insane authority, as they called it, a parable about insane authority. And of course, the Deus Ex Machina at the end is Caligari is revealed to be not actually a traveling carnival attraction guy, but like the head of like a mental hospital. And there was some push and pull about whether there should actually be an epilogue and a prologue, where Francis, our main character, is like saying, well, it actually has a different setting. It's like a real world setting. Ostensibly, I think the sets are still cardboard, but it's got like a fountain, like a real fountain, where they're like, it just, you think in the beginning that it's just two guys sitting in a fountain and telling stories to each other, but then it's revealed at the end that the setting is actually the mental hospital, and all of this has been a yada yada yada. And apparently Hans Janowitz is one of the main screenwriters. I think there were three of them, and he's one of the people who wanted there not to be the prologue and epilogue scenes, where maybe they could have made it thematically work if they had completely ditched the expressionist sets in those scenes. But some people have also speculated that was one of the budgetary constraints, or that decision was made for budgetary reasons. So interesting decision, where in the end, the moral of the story is kind of morphed. And there's a writer called Siegfried Krakauer, who wrote a book called From Caligari to Hitler, which I believe, he must be a film scholar, but I believe it just explores the political themes of German expressionism from the end of World War I to, I guess, Hitler's rise or whatever. But yeah, that's where the theory that the entire thing is about World War I, and the German authorities sending so many people to their deaths. And of course, a lot of this is coming from a really interesting University of New York program I found called City Cinematique, and that's another silent H there. But yeah, really hoity-toity discussion, but from two guys who seemed to know from an academic. They were using these interesting words like perspectival and filmic and ambiguated. The relationship between Siegfried Kracauer and Hans Janowitz seemed to be fairly cozy, and yeah, it's strange. Kracauer said that the addition of the prologue and the epilogue to the story turned it from being, a revolutionary film into being a conformist film, which is an extreme way of saying that it warps the theme a little bit, where you're playing with perspective, but you're not being consistent, and depending on which way you tweak the theme or the form or the function, you could have made it work, but it seemed almost whitewashed in that sense. I don't know. It's also very interesting. The City Cinematique episode was filmed in 2005, and this is coming from out of New York, and they made mention of I feel like maybe their producers just didn't want them to get too political, but you'd think that there would be some mention of World War II or even Korea or Vietnam or something. But what they said was oh yeah, there was all this death and despair and unimaginable atrocity in World War I, and of course we also have that now, and they spoke very generally about people have interpreted this in new ways. But I think one of the ways you could interpret it is that it's a story about what the authority of behavioral science means, or something, or what exactly was Francis. What was his deal? Was he actually insane in some way, mentally unwell? Was he dreaming this? Then again, it is a historic and often cited example of expressionist art in any medium. So it's obviously supposed to be allegorical. And one of the great lines from this little film talk that I listened to was from one of these guys. Were both professors. I didn't get their names, but one of the dudes said, "Expressionism is not interested in individual psychology. The characters are not individualized or realistic." So it's very obviously meant as an expressionist work to be seen as metaphorical and allegorical and all that. But yeah, just to say World War I was bad, and also today is bad, and not to mention all of especially World War II. It's I don't know if anything has been, I don't want to be a World War II guy, but the Siegfried Kracauer book seems kind of interesting, I guess. So yeah, that's pretty much what I got. Let's see. Oh yeah, one of the other writers who wrote about it was Lottie Eisner, who was the one who advanced the theory that the only reason the sets weren't different, which would have made it thematically consistent with what the original writers wanted, and in the beginning and end prologue and epilogue scenes, was because of those budgetary constraints. And one other interesting thing about this movie is that it actually was apparently very cheap to produce because of the weird cardboard sets. But even today, even with all that, I found it to be very visually stunning. And I don't know if the soundtrack that I heard was the original one, but it had pianos and wind instruments. And I think it might have come from some German academy or something. Yeah, I would recommend it just because the music is very good and the visual performances are good. And if you're interested in the history of film, it seems up there with, what's it called? Nosferatu, which I've seen in the classic, silent film genre. And I have to give a shout out to, I think it's Movies Silently on Twitter, who, without that really cool account and blog, it has a lot of in-depth film reviews on all of the classics. I wouldn't have been able to have such an interest in the silent film stuff. Metropolis is probably coming in the future, but next week we've got Godfather and Sonatine, or however it's called, that the Japanese gangster film I was talking about. I believe it's a gangster film. It's some kind of crime drama, so they'll be similar in that regard. We've gone only a little bit over time in this. I crunched at the end there. And I hope it's not too obvious that I'm reading off a list of notes that I've made for myself. But if you've seen these movies, if you haven't and you're not, afraid of the spoilers or whatever, thank you for joining me. Check out Sonatine maybe in the next week if you want to prepare for next week's episode. Chances are, if you're not a total plebe like me, you've already seen the original Godfather, which I'm looking forward to. Can't believe I've never watched it before. Scarface, Mary Elizabeth, free Mary Elizabeth, #free Mary. Peace.